Hi. Okay, Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. I have achieved quite a bit, and I'm really glad that the tapering and the ladders is done. So now this is not the best ladder, and I think if you did this 5 more times and tried to improve the process, you could get the rungs looking exactly like each other, and drill holes which are a bit more correct to the way they are on an actual boat, but I'd have to do some research. But I'm totally happy with this. Sprayed it grey, did a little bit of weathering. Now, of course, it's not meant to be rust. It's sort of meant to be, I don't know, a little bit of mixture of dirt and rust and bird poo and who knows what. Even though it's exaggerated, it's not very realistic. I just wanted to get a style of, not looking like a toy. I did the rungs in about 3 or 4 different colors, ranging from a light brown, dark brown, grey. Then I put a little bit of silver on, possibly a bit too much to the amount of climbing up this mast that one would actually encounter, but I'm okay with it. Doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be absolutely representative. Now, you can probably comment that the sort of white marks down the side is a bit much, but it's okay. Not going to complain about that. You see this one's got a little bit more of a brown effect on the rungs. A bit of metal, bit of brownishness, and keep in mind they're all the brass underneath. And then all of the bits sprayed grey with a, not very obvious at this point, but a bit of a brown tone down. And here and there you'll make out a little bit of dirtiness, but it doesn't need to be over the top, and it's not like the masts are actually, or I should say, it's not like the booms and the derrick are, items that are the highest weathering items on the ship. Now the derrick is this one. The derrick is that stronger piece which then is used to lift things out of there. So that's the derrick, is the crane on the foremast. The main mast still needs, even though it's the shorter one, needs that radar, and that one needs really only sail connections. So that's the the mizzen mast and mizzen mast boom. The rods are done, and they just need a bit of fishing rope, which I won't use this. This is what's supplied in the kit, but that's very overdone. I don't know if I'll use that for much, except maybe the tires on the side. So here's one of the rods, which I've put a yellow end on just for good measure. Now the top of the mast, so you'll see that on both of these, the top section is then painted white and those things. And even though I haven't stuck to the actual coloration of this model whatsoever, although in hindsight they used a sort of a olive green for some of the deck things, and for the masts I've used a sort of a sea grey. I might go with the white, or I'll go with a light grey upper on the top of the masts, rather than a bright white. So I do have to build these things that's one there, and this one which you can't see. Oh, now one thing to note, and it looks like it's really only one thing, which makes it not too bad. If you want to lift the cabin off the boat, it can't be attached to anything else. And at the moment, this is attached by an electrical line between the two masts for a light. And it looks cool to have lines going across there. But, you know, as soon as you move the cabin, you're going to have to position, you really only have the range of movement which stays within that, unless you've got a little clip or something. So we'll see how I handle that, and I'm not sure what they actually did on there, because it's a wound, it's two little lines wound around each other, and I'm only interested in having a representative cord between the two. Otherwise nothing, otherwise you can't lift that off. Oh, okay, now there are these. So, and this is some of what I've painted grey. You've got the two mainmast stays, you've got the foremast stays, and that one, which becomes the sort of front mast for that sail. The ones that I haven't done is that little triangle's worth, but I need to fit that mast into the cabin. But before I can do that, there are a number of little fittings on the top. So that's things like this. Little brass piece, which I actually then need to drill a hole into, because it doesn't have a hole, which means if you glue that on, it'll bump off very easily. One little bump and the super glue will let go. So it needs to have something inserted into it, a wire inserted, so that'll stay on. So there's, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You know, there's quite a number of little small items on the mainmast and on the foremast, including making a ring. Now I took a little bit of liberty on some areas of the cabin, but if I make the radar rings out of this softer brass, the problem with that is that you do stand the risk of bumping it, and then it's off. It's not a perfect circle anymore. So we'll see what I actually do about that. Because you don't want damaged items later on. You know, one little accidental bump, and well, how are you going to get that correct? Now when the mast comes through this hole and mounts into the hole on the deck, which obviously will only be a fit, you don't glue it there, otherwise you can't remove this. It almost acts just as a little bit of a positioning piece, so it only goes 1 or 2 millimeters into the deck just to help hold this in place. When you lift it off, you just lift it carefully and up comes the whole mast and everything. So that means that a part roughly like this, roughly like that, or actually probably the bigger one, this piece needs to be at the bottom there, and that needs to be the base of the mast, but it also then I need to cut a slot into here that needs to be glued into there. But that doesn't leave enough on the inside here, so this piece is still a very weak point, which means it needs to be a longer piece, and you need to put brackets on the inside here like a triangle, so that you make this absolutely sturdy on its own and very sturdy when the mast is on it, so that when you're pushing it in and out of the deck, this thing doesn't just break off. I didn't quite realize that at the time, but it's not too big a deal to do something on the inside there. Now I have got, and I haven't really spoken about the lighting, even though I think I demoed it in one of the early videos. 1, 2, 3, 4 LEDs. Unfortunately, at the time that I built this, I was not skilled enough, or at least decided not to make the port and starboard running lights, navigation lights, active. So they're present, but they are not going to go on. Now, I don't have access to the cabin anymore. That is a little bit of a break in what I'd said, and because this was done, what did I say, 30 years ago, accessibility to the inside, to be able to change your mind on things. But of course at that stage I really didn't think I would be wanting to do any changes on electrics. So anyway, we've got the 4 bulbs in there with the 4 LEDs, nothing on the top, except I do have the option, because they don't have bulbs in there, I can put in very small bulbs, and it probably would be good to do so. So these ones are dead. Would have been nice to have them lit, but they're solid moldings, so unfortunately. But those two sort of big beams, they can get lights into them. But the wires would then have to run in a little bit of a visible fashion, but that's not the worst. And then I have these. I have those little lights into which a small LED or bulb can be put, and although that is not part of the boat, I'm thinking that just for effect, I might mount these right near the top of the mast, so that if I run this boat in twilight, you could have these sort of lighting the whole ship. It'll look nice for photos, even though an actual trawler wouldn't have lights up the masts. Well, I don't think they would. These came from something else. I don't know what they came from. So I've got that option. I've got a ship's bell, but this they wouldn't really use a bell on a ship that is so small, and you could talk to all the crew, of which there's only about 2 crew, 3 maximum. But ship's bell might just look cool. Same with the anchor. Don't really have an anchor for this, but I may put one on just for good looks. There's a couple of little items like this, which are used on the top of the mast. So, you know, there's a number of quite small little things, and we've got these little blocks. We'll call them blocks, which are sort of like rope work items. And we do have the railings, which I can only do once there's no more manhandling of the ship. And I put the rings into the sail. That was a little bit of a difficult task. And I dirtied up the sail a little bit. The sails were way too clean, and I may have overdone it, but from a distance, you know, the further back I go, the less dirty it appears if you look closely. It just looked a bit too clean and even, so I just used a bit of watercolor. Now all of this, well, that's Humbrol grey, and watercolor acrylics. So if this got wet, it would take off some of that, but it's not going to get wet because it's not going to be run in the rain, and it's not going to be splashed up against. So anyway, there's a lot of little fiddly bits that still to get done, and some obviously less fiddly bits. There's a bunch of bulbs, by the way. Now those are actual bulbs, not LEDs. Those are a little bit too big to go into the likes of that. But I do have other stuff. And then to have the boat with a bunch of LED lights on it, you get a completely different atmospheric feel depending on which lights you put on. It's not like just because you have all the lights, well, you switch them all on and that's that. You ride around with all the lights on. For photographic effect, one can have cabin lights on, cabin lights off, the mast lights on, the headlights on and off, a variety of things. And of course tweak the brightness of different things so that you can sort of make for some nice photos since I've gone to all the trouble of this on this boat. But how do you control a bunch of different lighting variations while it's out on the water? And one of the ways you can do that is with a servo that simply runs a positive across a whole bunch of variations of the other side of the lighting. So you can have the 2 wires on this one, 1 on that one, and depending on where your servo is touching, those LEDs will then get active at that point. Move on. So you can range from branching all of the lights on to none of the lights on, to one of the lights on, to the headlights only, etc. And then you just need to have markings on the on the radio control. Now, of course, the 2-channel radio control won't work for that, and neither will a normal 4-channel, although throttle could be used for that. So actually, no, 4-channel would work. Depends if you wanted to use throttle for throttle. But anyway, it can't have a spring back onto central like the channels often have. So you may want to go to a 5-channel with a flap slider, and then you position so that the servo arm would touch the different lights on settings at different positions of that flap setting or of the throttle setting, if you want to do it that way. Now that's a little bit of extra work and a little bit of hassle, but it's not that big a deal. You know, I have the lights present, and it's sort of a little bit of an extra trial on how effective it was as a method of controlling lighting while out on the water. So I'll probably do it, which does mean changing the radio to a 4-channel, which I may inevitably have to do anyway because I can't find a matching transmitter and receiver for this particular 2-channel. Now I have decided not to, and simply because I am getting a bit tired and I don't want to fuss with the hole anymore, I'm not going to put on those strakes, and I'm not going to put on, can you see it on here? There's sort of like I don't know what you call it, there's like a bumper piece that runs roughly over there, so that I imagine if you came up and rubbed against the side or anywhere, firstly the tires are there, but there's also a little bit of a raised piece. I didn't realize that at the time of building the hole, and I'm definitely not adding that on now. So here and there's little things that are being done differently or not at all. Like I'm also not having those holes where a wave washing over the deck is able to then run off. I'm hoping that with the manner in which the engine and the internals works, I don't have to actually touch the cabin for a long time. You really only need to get in the front, switch on, switch off, charge the battery out there, and the cabin can stay in place. And for the lighting, by the way, I would run that onto probably onto a 9-volt battery, put in the necessary resistors so that a 9-volt battery can be used, and that can be placed inside here. 9-volt battery can be mounted in there in a little removable thing, because that'll last quite long, and then it'll can probably go via a switch to the front so that you can switch on the ability to have your lights on at all. And if you're not going to use them, you don't need to switch that switch on. And then that, so if you move to the servo for lighting, nothing would happen because you haven't activated the power supply for the lighting. Now, if you didn't catch the end of one of the videos, I did manage to get the batteries active via what I had said at the time as I was sort of discussing it, simply charging it like a car battery. So I better take this piece off now because you don't want those pieces touching. So this battery did charge, and I then thought, well, okay, you know, if you put that on and touch this into there, red on red, black on black, and simply charge it like a car charger, like when you jump start a car, for a short while, just to get a little bit of voltage onto that green one, and then charge it, and it worked. I'm not sure why the chargers themselves are not made to just achieve that very same thing. It's obviously reasons, but so that's, you know, that's is at least okay. I do still need to varnish the deck, so you can see that the front is a bit of a darker effect over here, and this whole section of the deck hasn't been varnished, and the only real thing there is, although it's probably not even that important, just a little bit of water resistance for when my hands may be wet, taking it in and out of the water gives that a little bit more durability. So I am looking forward to finishing it. At this stage, I would say it's still looking like a month of sedate work. I could finish it in 2 weeks if I put in a fair bit more effort. But we've already reached such a huge step forward with these masts and ladders completed, and the tapering. That tapering, really, I made it mentally a much bigger issue than it should have been. So you can see on the back of the mast there, yeah, that's actually a good indication. That was closer to the color that I sprayed, and the front of the mast is the much more darkened brown. I didn't particularly plan it that the back side should be left the more blue-grey, but it all looks okay to me. The masts will stand out enough against the rest of the ship, and yet I didn't want a bright color. I certainly didn't want anything like what the pictures there give. So I'm happy with that. Anyway, there'll be the light and grey variation on the mast, and I just put on yellow onto the rods. On there, they don't actually have any coloration difference on the rods. And that is about all that I can think to say at the moment. I will only get to the railings on the edge of the boat. Probably even only after the masts have all been done and the internals are finalized and this piece has been redone. So actually the railings will probably be close to the last things put onto the boat. Okay, that is the Sunday catch-up, and there probably won't be one in the week, so it'll be a week again until the next, which really is only going to be small fittings on the mast as I'm looking at it. It would have been nice if there was a bit more to work from. They really didn't give a lot of, photo coverage, and even though they have these, it's black and white pictures, and many of them have been taken from a distance that doesn't really give you that detail. And again, I have looked online and I'm not finding a single person that has built that. There must be, I mean, you cannot tell me that nobody built that. I mean, I don't know how many they must have sold. And then one last thing before I end this video. These things for the Escampavio Pilar, which is that one right at the back there now. I'm starting to do the Fusion 360 design work for them. And again, the temptation to have a little bit of a hold up on this, because I can't find any reference. I can't even find a reference for the boat at all. Nothing. The only reference is the kit which you get. I don't know how it's possible that there could have been this Spanish revenue launch, or as they also called it, a picket pinnace, picketing the ports so that you couldn't land there unless you paid a tax. So what I'm looking for is detail on a gun like this, which I'm, to the best of my evaluation at this point, this would be a 3-pounder and not above. Highly unlikely to be above a 3-pounder. But as you can see, this is, this would have been an absolute simple design, not based on anything by the people that made the kit. The mount is just absolutely simple. By the way, the reason that I need to remake this stuff is because this is absolutely terrible. And I don't know the name of this thing to get air down to the motor, to the engine. So I'm busy starting a design, and I haven't touched Fusion 360 in a while. So I'm designing without having proper reference. Now, at least for that piece, maybe it's close to the way it was, and if there's slight dimension differences, well, tough luck. And as far as that, well, I might have to just choose some British gun and or Spanish, if I can find anything whatsoever, on a deck-mounted, sometimes called swivel cannon because they can swivel, but a swivel gun is actually a bit of a different thing. It's smaller and on a slightly different type of swivel. But anyway, trying to get a little bit of headway on that, so that when this boat is finished, at least these pieces are being made for the Escampavia. Okay, happy modeling. Till next time.